Hey guys, it's been a while. I've been studying for my economics exams the past several days, half week, close to a week, and I took them yesterday, and now let's get back to college football. College football with Sam is active, back. The usual content schedule is something I'm going to try and continue throughout the rest of the year, though when other exams come up, I'll certainly give you guys a heads up. So thank you for your patience. Today we're going to be talking about Michigan football. Before we get into recruiting news, some predictions made about Michigan football by college football analysts and sports radio hosts, talk show hosts, sports writers, please consider liking this video, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and commenting your thoughts on Michigan recruiting and Michigan football down below. Michigan recruiting has taken a upswing in the past few, I'd say past few weeks, even past few months. We're now into the middle of March 2023. So that's very exciting. I'll be ecstatic when the 2023 season actually gets here. And speaking of which, we're going to talk about some way too early Michigan predictions for the 2023 season as spring practice kicks off. This was published today at 12:03 a.m., so someone was working late. Enzo Flojo, or maybe Floho specifically, was working very late. Good on him. 4-minute read, published 12:03 a.m. I admire the commitment by Enzo here. And let's just get right into it. It's by clutchpoints.com. I'll link it down below. This isn't Michigan recruiting, but it's just some early predictions. It's things that I mostly agree with, one I do disagree with, but let's get into it. Prediction number one is Roman Wilson tallies 800 receiving yards. Michigan's wide receiver core has a wealth of talent. Roman Wilson seems to be poised to take on the role of the offense's top receiving target this season. With impressive speed, he presents multiple threats to opposing defenses, exploits screens, line up in the slot, stretch the field deep. He's expected to be a key receiver for quarterback J.J. McCarthy. He takes over the position held by Ronnie Bell in 2022, who finished first with the most receptions on the team at 62. Wilson is predicted to surpass that with 60 or more receptions and become the go-to option as receiver one. Wilson should end up with 800-plus receiving yards. Maybe he can get to 1,000 receiving yards at something that to me seems very uncharacteristic of Harbaugh offenses. But with all that returns on the offensive line, running back room, quarterback room, wide receiver, the transfer targets that are coming in at O-line and tight end, Michigan's offense could be one of the best. It actually could be possibly the best in the country. So maybe Roman Wilson does get 800, maybe even more than 1,000 receiving yards. I'd agree with 800 or more. I don't know about 1,000, but that's just something to keep in mind. Michigan is a very underrated wide receiver room, coached by Ron Bellamy, of course. Number two, is Blake Corum is unstoppable on the ground. Many consider Blake Corum to be the top returning running back in college football. Bijan Robinson was better than him last year. Maybe Muhammad Ibrahim, maybe Chase Brown. But all three of those have left. Corum's back, going to get another preseason of work in. He was a Heisman Trophy contender until he sustained a season-ending injury in Week 11. He doesn't get injured there and is healthy for OSU and Purdue. He might have won the Heisman, probably would have won the Doak Walker Award. Despite missing 3 games, he managed to rush for nearly 1,500 yards, only 266 yards away from the top spot in college football. Looking ahead with an offensive line full of future NFL draft picks, Corum should be unstoppable along the ground. Clutch Points has him going over 1,500 rushing yards. Easy, which I agree with completely. And don't be shocked if he is a Heisman Trophy contender once again in 2023. The problem with the latter statement about Corum being a Heisman Trophy contender is Donovan Edwards. Edwards was consistently injured last year. He isn't injured. Michigan probably has an extra few hundred rushing yards together with him. I know if Corum was healthy, Edwards wouldn't have seen the same action he did against Ohio State, but I imagine he still gets one long rush. And if Edwards was healthy for a lot of games, like against Illinois, for example, or against smaller competition, He would have had more than 1,000 yards. Easy. Him and Corum would have been pretty close to each other on the rushing yard end. Edwards would have had more yards after contact. Not after contact, but per carry. Higher top-end speed, better back in space, would have had more receiving yards. Part of me would almost say that Edwards might be a better contender for the Heisman Trophy. He's a more all-purpose player. I think has the higher ceiling than Corum, but I think Corum will be a Heisman contender in 2023. McCarthy entering the Heisman conversation is prediction number 3. I disagree with that. McCarthy had an impressive 65% completion rating in 2025. He had 22 passing touchdowns, only 5 picks, and ranked top 25 for passing efficiency. McCarthy's standout performance against Ohio State won him the heart of many Michigan fans and earned him a lot of haters nationwide. 263 yards and 3 touchdowns in that marquee matchup. He had a higher QBR than Stetson Bennett did against the Ohio State defense, just for comparison. Kirk Campbell's been promoted to quarterback's coach. McCarthy will have a different voice guiding him and may be able to evolve the passing game further. He took big strides from 2021 into 2022. I expect him to take big strides again from 22 to 23. Here's the problem, though. Michigan does not pass enough, nor will they with the returning production they have at running back and O-line and transfer portal, incoming transfers, nor will they under any Jim Harbaugh-led offense. Michigan will never pass the ball enough to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. J.J. McCarthy could have like a Stetson Bennett-like year where his yards per attempt passing is insanely high, where he has a really good deep ball, where he has an impressive amount of total yards despite having few passing attempts and rushing attempts. It'll never be enough for him to win the actual award, though. Best case scenario, he could enter the Heisman conversation, but he's not going to win it. Not at all. And in my opinion, he's not even a top 5 quarterback nationally. Definitely not top 2 or 3. That'd be Caleb Williams and Jalen Daniels along with Drake May for the top 3. So J.J. McCarthy maybe could contend for the Heisman. It would be more of statistics than actual who's the best quarterback in the nation kind of thing, though. And last but not least is number 4, Michigan wins the national title. Not even going to further explain it because I've already explained it enough, but I agree with that. I think Michigan's going 15-0. They're going to dominate the Big Ten. They're going to handily beat the teams they face in the college football playoff. And I think Jim Harbaugh will win his first and probably only national title at Michigan. Unless recruiting drastically changes, drastically improves, and Michigan becomes one of the top transfer portal users in college football, and Michigan can do even better at developing NFL talent with the offense they run, the pro spread. They'd have to mimic Georgia in recruiting and development more in order for me to believe they could win more than one national title or win any national title if they don't win it this year. But speaking of recruiting, Michigan has a top 5 recruiting class in both 2024 and 2025. I bet you didn't know that. They are number 5 in 2024. They're number 4 in 2025. 2025, they have 2 commits. Chris Ewald, a cornerback from Hollywood, Florida, who's a top 40 player, ranked 38th nationally, 3rd best at his position, 5th best in the state. They have Mantrez Walker, an unranked linebacker from Buford, Georgia, as their other commit. Walker stands at 5'11", 210 pounds. Ewald stands at 6 foot, 160 pounds. Walker committed February 11th of this year. Ewald committed December 16th of 2022. The 2024 recruiting class is 5th overall. They have 7 hard commits. Jacob Oden, a 4-star athlete. Hogan Hansen, 4-star tight end. Mason Curtis, 4-star linebacker. Luke Hamilton, a 4-star offensive tackle. Ted Hammond, 4-star defensive lineman. Manuel Beagle, 3-star defensive lineman. Zach Ludwig, a 3-star linebacker. They're number 5th in the country in the composite. They're only behind Georgia, who's number 1, LSU, who's number 2, Notre Dame, who's number 3, and Florida State, who is number 4. They hold the top class in the Big Ten currently, ahead of Ohio State, ahead of Penn State, ahead of Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Rutgers, ahead of Michigan State. Had to scroll all the way down to find them. And they're ahead of a lot of different teams. Ahead of Nebraska, who's at 52nd, Maryland, Northwestern, who are at 58, 59. They lead the Big Ten in recruiting currently. Oh, they're also ahead of Iowa, who's 13th, but they have 6 commits, 5 of them 3 stars. So that's just because of numbers and not quality. Michigan at least they have 7 commits, which means, some of its numbers, but they also have 5 4 stars. And Jadyn Davis and some other impressive players are currently crystal balled to Michigan. 2024 5-star quarterback Jadyn Davis is visiting Michigan this weekend. He has 5 crystal balls to the Wolverines. 5-star quarterback. Davis is 6'1.5", 192 pounds. He's ranked as the 15th best player in the country, according to 24/7 Sports, second best quarterback. He's ranked as the 24th best player, according to the composite, 4th best quarterback there. He has crystal balls from Steve Wiltfong, the director of recruiting, Hale McGrannon, a South Carolina insider, Steve Lorenz and Sam Webb, well-known Michigan insiders, and Brian Don, a well-known national recruiting analyst. So safe to say, Michigan's in the lead for Jadyn Davis. Took a visit to Clemson. He's listed as warm to North Carolina, Penn State, and Tennessee, along with Michigan. Michigan might be able to lock him up this week. He also unofficially visited North Carolina in 2023, Tennessee in 2022. Just wanted to mention that. In total, he has had 3,425 passing yards, 43 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 26 rushing yards with 2 rushing touchdowns. Certainly a prolific passer. And again, when you only look at 24/7 Sports ranking, not the composite, there's only one quarterback ahead of him. Dylan Raiola, once committed to Ohio State, now is looking like a battle between USC, Oregon, Alabama, and can't forget, because this is the most notable contender, Nebraska, as Raiola is a legacy recruit for the Cornhuskers. So Jadyn Davis is visiting this weekend. This weekend will be very important recruiting weekend for Michigan football. 5-star quarterback Jadyn Davis will be meeting new quarterbacks coach Kirk Campbell for the first time. 4-star legacy offensive lineman Blake Frazier is coming back for another trip. 3-star Ohio offensive lineman Ben Roebuck is making a second consecutive visit. And 5-star edge rusher Dylan Stewart is also making a recruiting trip. So 2 5-stars making a trip to Michigan this weekend to check out what Michigan's about. There's also a 4-star running back, Taylon Tatum, who's 3rd at his position, 6th best player from Texas, ranked as a 92 according to 24/7 Sports, 98 according to the composite. He was crystal balled to Michigan Monday by Mike Roach, a Texas insider. He has 2,629 career rushing yards. Michigan currently has a top 5 class in both 2024 and 2023. If they can maintain that success, if they can get back to what was normal in the Jim Harbaugh era, or if they continue slipping to what we saw in this past season's recruiting class, will be a huge determining factor as to where Michigan football is in regards to success. Ohio State and Penn State have been out recruiting Michigan for the past 2 seasons. Michigan State, I would say, out recruited Michigan in high school recruiting this past year in certain areas, though I would say Michigan out recruited them in the portal. And Wisconsin under Fickell isn't going to slow down. Nebraska under Rule, if they simply get back to a bowl game, is going to be put in contention for recruiting. Maryland has recruited successfully before. Illinois, that state has some talent there, and if Brett Bielema continues to have success, they could rack up some decent recruiting classes. So there's just a lot. There's a lot of things to take in. The Big Ten is only going to get tougher with USC and UCLA coming in. And the way Ohio State recruits, look, they run a spread. It's not exactly advantageous to them in the month of November. The Big Ten, really Michigan and a team like Georgia and Michigan's offense really match up well with Ohio State's defense currently. It's just a fact. But if you want to contend for national champions, You got to recruit like Ohio State does on offense and even defense. Schematics and the fact that Jim Knowles is adjusting to Big Ten play has more to do with Ohio State's defensive issues than talent. They have JT Tuimoloau. They have Jack Sawyer. They have Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks. Those are 5 stars on defense. Ohio State has, they had Jackson Smith and Jigba, 5-star. They had Marvin Harrison Jr., who's a highly ranked 4-star. Brandon Innes, who's coming in, who's a 5-star. Their current top member of their 2024 recruiting class is a 5-star wide receiver. Kyle McCord is a 5-star. Travion Henderson at running back is a 5-star. Donovan Jackson at offensive guard, 5-star. Michigan doesn't have too many 5-stars. They have J.J. McCarthy. If you look at 24/7 Sports Composite, they have Donovan Edwards if you look at just 24/7 Sports. I think that's probably it. Probably it. They don't have Will Johnson, too. Can't forget him. He's going to be an All-American corner, future NFL corner, too. 5-star. That's it. That's it. You can beat Georgia. You can beat Alabama. You can beat Ohio State. You can beat any team with the talent roster that Michigan has. You can. You're not in the position that Michigan State or Wisconsin or even future conference member UCLA are in. You have top 15 talent. Clemson nearly won a national title with top 15 talent. They won a championship with fringe top 10 talent. But they had the best staff in the nation, or one of the best staffs in the nation. They had a legend at defensive coordinator. They had a legend at quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who was developed. And again, we're not going to talk about the off-field issues, but as a quarterback, as a player, phenomenally developed, phenomenal talent. There's an argument that he should have won the Heisman instead of Lamar Jackson, but we're not going to entertain that. Recruiting better allows for a higher margin of error. In order for Michigan to go 15-0, their team has to play their A game. No, not A. They have to play their A-plus game in every big game they have. I say big game in quotes because sometimes when the number 1 and number 5 team meet up and then they face and one team blows out the other, you're like, oh, wait. Actually, it wasn't as big of a game as we thought. There was just a lot of momentum leading up to the game, but in retrospect, it really wasn't a big game. Butch Jones in 2016, his top 10 Tennessee team playing Texas A&M. That was a big game at the time, but when the season was over, both teams were unranked. Alabama traveling to face Tennessee that year. Big game at the time. At the end of the day, it wasn't a big game for Bama. In retrospect, just wasn't a good matchup. Georgia they did not play their A game against Ohio State. Now, Ohio State matched up well with them, but Georgia was able to get away with not playing their A-plus game, even in a playoff game, because of how good of a staff they had, because of how good the schematics and fundamentals were taught to their players on both defense and offense, not just offense in Ohio State's case. And Ohio State, despite, in my opinion, having the better game plan, preparing better, and even out-coaching Georgia for 3 quarters, still fell short. Georgia's margin for error was bigger. It's bigger than Michigan's. Same thing with Alabama. Alabama in 2021 played so many close games, it was disgusting, and they almost won a national title, and they blew out the national champion. So recruiting is so huge. And I think some websites and some analysts actually overrate recruiting, which boggles my mind because that's hard to do. But recruiting is really important. And elite recruiting paired with elite coaching is nearly unstoppable. Now again, every given Saturday, you never know. It's why Michigan State was able to beat Michigan so many times over the years. It's why Mel Tucker still has a winning record against Jim Harbaugh, and why Mark D'Antonio had a winning record against Michigan. Every given Saturday, plus in D'Antonio's case, he had the superior coaching staff compared to most Michigan teams he faced. Actually, I'd say probably all of them outside of the 2018 and 19 Michigan teams and maybe the 16 and 17 ones, but from the second year of his tenure to 2015 or 14, he had a better staff than Michigan did, and that made up for the shortings at recruiting. Plus, Michigan under Hoke and Richrod did not have good coaching staffs. But anyway, maybe I'm rambling too much. Maybe I went off on a long tangent there. But I'm trying to stress the importance of recruiting. If you're a Michigan fan like me who wants to see not just playoff appearances, but playoff wins and consistent playoff appearances and consistent playoff wins, I want Michigan to have some years where they look like 2019 Ohio State, or they execute in the playoffs like 2014 Ohio State. I want to see some years where Michigan football is being talked about possibly being the greatest team or one of the greatest teams of all time if they go 15-0. The only way that's happening is if they recruit better. So good on Jim Harbaugh, good on Michigan, good on the NIL landscape finally turning at the University of Michigan. But you got to see consistency, and it's very early. This is very early. There have been teams that have had top 10 recruiting classes early in a cycle, and they finish outside the top 20, top 25. So Michigan has to execute well on the field, win at a high level, continue to recruit at a high level, and they will be contenders year after year. They will be viewed by everyone as an elite team if they do those things. But if they do those, is a big question mark. But with Jadyn Davis visiting this week, 5-star edge rusher, a crystal ball from a highly ranked running back, I'm excited. Despite Michigan's on-field success the past 2 years, recruiting has been mostly dead for the past 2 years in a lot of aspects. So, at least dead compared to what some of Jim Harbaugh's earlier classes were. But I'd rather have execution than I would recruiting hype. But when you have both, which is what, Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State have, and maybe USC will gain that, maybe Texas will gain it. Texas is recruiting well, and I think Sark is getting them on the right path. That's the most exciting. Thank you guys for watching. If you're new to the channel, I encourage you to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. See you guys later, and thank you for watching. Bye.